Welcome back to the Symone podcast, where we talk about the art, heart, and science of being a great leader. I am your host, Symone, and today's episode is a remix of a previous episode. We are going to talk about what I think is the number one topic for every leader, which is why every leader needs to be more confident. Now, you may be thinking, nothing is worse than a know-it-all leader who never listens to anyone and thinks they're the king of the hill all the time. But we're not talking about fake confidence. That's arrogance. And a lot of those type of leaders actually suffer from imposter syndrome, which I actually did an episode about. But this episode is about real confidence, how expensive it is when you don't have it, how you can get more of it, how you can increase your confidence capacity, and what are the key behaviors that will not only just increase your own confidence in yourself, but also get your team to have more confidence in you. I can't tell you how important this topic is. I think with all of the changes that are going on in the business world and also within ministry, it's more important now than ever to really be focused on what matters most, and that is understanding where you're anchored and how you can create confidence within yourself and within your organization. So today's episode, we're going to dig into that. I've got 4 areas I'm going to teach you, and I can't wait to get started. So let's go. So we have talked about confidence a little bit in the past, and we were talking last week about why imposter syndrome is something that every leader goes through, and you will experience it at some point in time. But just because those thoughts show up in your mind doesn't mean that you have to go with them, doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, it doesn't mean that you have to give in to them at all. And so I did give some strategies for how you can rewrite some of those beliefs that have you feeling like an imposter. But what I wanted to do with this episode is really just dig into why confidence is so important in leadership in the first place. And there are 4 critical areas that I'm going to discuss today that are really going to drive home the role that confidence plays in the life of the leader as well as the life of the organization. I think we can never underestimate how important confidence is in living the quality of life that you want to live just as a human being, and then also achieving some of the results that you kind of set your targets on as a leader. So let's just go ahead and dig into the first one. And this is going to sound very familiar. Confidence is really just another word for trust, and people always want to be able to trust their leaders. Demonstrating self-confidence is one way that you demonstrate trustworthiness to others, because your confidence gives people permission to trust you. If you are walking around looking unsure, looking like scared all the time, it has an effect on your team. One of the very first lessons I learned as a brand new leader several years ago, about a decade ago, actually more than a decade ago, this is one of the most important lessons that I've ever learned, actually, is that somebody is always watching you. You are never off the radar when you are a leader. And the thing is, however the leader sets the mood and the emotional direction of the team is going to follow. And so, no, you're not responsible for everyone's mood and everyone's feeling on the team, but as the leader, you are responsible for setting the emotional tone and the direction. And then so if you're leading from a place of fear, that fear is contagious. And in the same way, if you're leading from a place of confidence and a place of trust, that trust is contagious as well. It's really important that you remember that trust is not unconditional, right? We know we love unconditional love, right? That's the kind of love that we get from God, and the best of us find people in our lives that we can extend that unconditional love to. However, trust does not work the same way. Trust thrives with consistency, with integrity, with competence, with intention, with personal credibility. There are a number of factors that cause trust to grow and thrive. The more that you develop your confidence capacity by working on those things that I just mentioned, the more trust people extend to you to lead them. So the more you grow your confidence, the more consistent you are, the more personal credibility you demonstrate, the more you make good on your intentions. That's my personal definition of integrity. How often do I make good on my intention? Meaning, how often do I execute on my intentions, right? The more you do those things, the more people are exposed to you doing those things, the more capacity for confidence you are growing within yourself, and the more trust that your team and your organization will extend to you. Now, I want to lay this thought on you. Confidence or trust is really the only true global currency or method of exchange. Now, I know people are going to say, well, what about money? You know, we have money that we can exchange all over the world. We have international trade. We have currency exchanges. We have, money. If you travel to a foreign country, I can take my US dollars and exchange them for pesos. And then when I'm ready to leave, I can exchange those pesos that I have left over for US dollars. So what do you mean that confidence is really the only true global currency? Well, even from an economic perspective or a global economics perspective, whenever we're talking about exchanging currencies, what we're really doing is talking about the perception of trust in the source of the money. Meaning there's a perception that the US dollar is worth a certain amount, it has a certain value. And depending upon which country we go to, they will exchange a certain quantity of their standard currency for that US dollar based on the perception of value. Well, perception of value is largely based on trust. So even our financial system is really not based on like the gold standard like it used to. There was once upon a time, if you pull out a dollar bill and you look at the face of it, it'll say a $1 note, because at once upon a time, the Federal Reserve actually had gold that backed up that money. And so you could take it to the Federal Reserve and say, I like $1 worth of gold, and they would give it to you. Well, that was erased with the Bretton Woods Agreement many, many years ago. And so, not to give you this political science lesson, but, we now trust, we now exchange money on the basis of trust, on confidence and its value. It's really perception. And that confidence and that trust is really a perception of the nations in question, their ability to pay, or how much credibility they have on the international economic stage. So everything that we're doing is really based on trust. The more trust that exists within your team or organization, the faster and more nimble you will be able to move. This is extremely important. If you have large scale or even small scale strategic initiatives, sometimes if you ever feel like your team is moving really slow, chances are it's not that there's a competence issue. The chances are that the real issue is trust. So I said this during the last episode, and I'm going to repeat it today. Every leader needs to read Stephen M. R. Covey's book, The Speed of Trust, because it's going to define for you the specific characteristics that will help you build trust and lay out exactly the case for building trust within your organization, and how when you work on trust, you actually are working on everything else. So that's number one. Confidence is really just another word for trust, and everybody wants to be able to trust their leader, right? So number two, confidence enables you to take calculated risks. Have you ever been around a fear-based leader? They usually don't ever want to change. They don't want to do anything new. Fear-based leaders don't really innovate, and they tend to be short on creative problem-solving skills. And a lot of times the reason why that is because if I divert from what is normal or what is expected, I have no promise that it's going to work out. And so I'd rather just stay with what I know instead of venture out into the dark unknown and try something new that, in my mind, by my perception, is not guaranteed to work out. And people who kind of play in that area a lot, people who tend to have that mindset of thinking, usually struggle with recovery and resilience. And confidence does come, resilience and recovery, I should say, is another variation on confidence, because what it is it's the confidence to know that even if there is a mistake made or even if something goes wrong, you have the ability to move forward. You have the ability to regroup, move forward, and forge ahead. And that is a form of confidence. So having resilience in your back pocket, believing in your ability to bounce back, allows you as a leader to take out of the box approaches to new challenges that may come up on a daily basis. You know, it also allows you to respond to crises and unexpected events in an agile manner. So we're not going to have 17 meetings. We're not going to go through all this red tape to make very simple decisions. You know, whenever you see organizations that are buried in red tape, it's usually because there's a lack of trust and there's a lack of confidence in the organization. And there are different reasons for that. Sometimes it is a competence issue. Sometimes it's a resourcing issue. But at the end of the day, someone in the organization doesn't trust someone else to get a certain kind of job done. Hence the slow as molasses growth and movement on any and everything. So lack of confidence will cost you innovation. It will cost you being on the cutting edge. It will cost you regrouping quickly if something goes wrong, you know, whether it's your fault or not. So it's really important to work on your confidence as a leader to avoid those situations so that you can be ready for life when life happens, because it does happen, right? Number 3, confident leaders staff for diversity. This is probably my favorite one on the list. So I saw a recent study by Citigroup that estimated that the U.S. economy has lost out on up to $16 trillion, that's trillion with a T, over the past 20 years by not addressing racial economic gaps just between Black and white Americans. Now there are economic gaps between multiple racial and ethnic groups, but just failing to address the economic gap between Black and white Americans alone has been estimated to have cost the U.S. economy up to $16 trillion over the last 20 years. That's a lot of money. So the way that these economists came up with this number is by estimating the loss in economic growth overall based on wage gaps, educational disparities, and access to housing and business credit. Now, what does this have to do with confidence? Well, what I can tell you is that one of the byproducts of racial and ethnic discrimination is a lack of confidence. Because that's essentially what's happening here. These financial institutions are expressing a lack of confidence in, according to this study, Black consumers, Black business owners, which is why they're not extending them the opportunities, not extending them the credit, not extending them the acceptance to certain educational institutions, so forth and so on. And so because there is no confidence there, the entire economy is suffering because of lack of diversity, right? So, because of course, when Black consumers and Black business owners build wealth, it's not just Black people building wealth for Black people. You know, these are U.S. citizens. So when these people are building wealth, it applies to the U.S. GDP, the gross domestic product. And so it affects the economy overall. So all of us as citizens, no matter what your ethnic background is, benefit from diversity. When leaders across industries are more confident of their own abilities and release antiquated and racist ideas about the competence and trustworthiness of colleagues, employees, loan applicants, students who don't share the same ethnic or socioeconomic background as them, more wealth is generated, not just for the beneficiaries, which is what I just said, but for our country's GDP overall. Now, that's a really, really, really big picture, 30,000 foot view of the effect of diversity, and why confidence is so important in how we apply measures to be more diverse and how we select people and how we staff. But let's talk about it on an organizational perspective. Let's make it a more micro situation. Staffing for a diverse team. Staffing for diverse, relevant perspectives and backgrounds is a highly strategic move to ensure that all relevant voices are being heard when key decisions are being made. Listen, and I want you to lean in when I say this. If you only staff for agreement instead of staffing for alignment, you will miss opportunities to advance your agenda beyond what is familiar into what very well may be extraordinary. This is so important because a lot of people confuse the idea of agreement and alignment. See, agreement can be based on personalities, can be based on having the exact same perspective. But alignment means, hey, you think you bring a certain strength to the table, I bring a certain strength to the table, but we have the same goal. See, alignment is focused on the mission, not on the opinion per se, right? And so we want to staff for alignment, right? That's why when you hear about diversity, you always hear about inclusion. Why? Because the diversity part is the diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences. And by the way, diversity is not limited to racial or ethnic diversity. It's also diversity of perspective, diversity of educational background, diversity of socioeconomic background, diversity of sexual orientation. There's lots of different ways to express diversity, right? Now, the inclusion part of it is making sure that this diverse perspective is relevant to the goal of the organization, relevant to the strategic objectives to the organization. So it's not diversity just to say, hey, we're a United Color of Bannatyne. Remember that commercial and how they would have like one of everybody look like It's a Small World. It's not just to be pretty, to make it look good, but then not to actually include those perspectives in a way that impacts decision making and impacts profit strategies and things of that nature. It's diversity that matters, right? And so it's important that those diverse perspectives are relevant to the issues that are being decided upon by your organization. So don't miss extraordinary because you only want what's familiar around you. And let's wrap it up with the last one. The fourth reason why confidence is so important to leadership is that confident leaders have a working compass. And this compass is it can help you in multiple ways, right? So what is a compass? A compass is a tool that helps you navigate to a chosen destination, but it also helps you find your bearings if you get lost along the way. So it's different than a map, right? Your compass is your guide, and when in place, it's a source of confidence when charting new territory, when setting new goals, when redirecting from missteps, and when articulating vision for yourself and your team, right? That's finding that North Star. It's being able to know where you're at. Those are all the things that a compass does, right? And without confidence, Your ability to see and cast a vision for others or for yourself is severely handicapped by fear, indecision, over reliance on what's familiar, and success sabotage, because ultimately that's what ends up happening when you can't see, you don't know where you're going, you don't have a clear vision, you're afraid, you're scared to make a decision, you're misreading data, you're stuck on tradition, those kind of things. You will eventually sabotage your own success, and therefore you will sabotage the success of your team or organization, right? Now, every leader has their own unique compass that is comprised of your personal values, ethics, and your personal competencies. But confidence is the foundation on which all those things are set. So confidence is the gear in the compass that makes sure that makes the compass work correctly, right? Without it, leaders get lost and they can't get found, and you inevitably will lose the confidence of your team. Right? So we need that confidence compass to make sure that we're going in the right direction, and that if somehow we get lost along the way, because it's bound to happen. I mean, life happens to everyone, that we have that compass where we know how to get ourselves back to where we need to be. And that's both on an individual level as a leader for your own life, as well as how to steer your team back to where it needs to be, or how to steer your team to a goal effectively, right? So that's the importance of confidence. All of those things are built on top of confidence. You really can't do too much without nurturing and cultivating true confidence. You need that compass. So out of those four, so the first one, let's go back. The first one was people want to be able to trust their leaders, and confidence is just another word for trust, right? So that's building trust within your organization is largely dependent on you demonstrating your own confidence, right? Number two, confidence enables you to take calculated risk. Go big or go home. Without any risk, there's usually not any reward, right? Number three, confident leaders staff for diversity. Why? Because you need diverse, relevant perspectives at the table to make the decisions that are coming across the table today. You need multiple perspectives. You always want to staff for alignment, not just agreement. And finally, confident leaders need a working compass, and that compass, which steers you in the right direction and gets you home if you get lost, is completely set by confidence, right? So let's do a self-check. Out of those four, where would you give yourself a gold star? Go ahead. You have my permission to pat yourself on the back if you know that out of those four, one of those items is the one that you do you do the best at, right? So gold star for you. Now, I also want you to be honest enough with yourself to say, hey, I get a gold star over here, but in this one, maybe in the diversity one, maybe in the compass one, whichever one it is, I need a little bit more help. I need a little bit more work. Hey, self-awareness is about 70% of the work. Just being aware of what you need, being aware of what your strengths and what your opportunities are is huge. And being able to stand in that and not feel like you're a failure because you have a weakness or because you have an opportunity. Listen, we all have things that we need to work on. We all have things that we need to cultivate. It's okay. Now, once you have identified where your strengths are and where your opportunity is, I want you to go back to episode 18, which is the imposter syndrome, the part 1 to this part 2. And I want you to work on any beliefs that may be holding you back. Remember, I gave you a strategy for how to identify those beliefs that are holding you back and how to replace them with a true statement. And then the next thing you do is you take the next action, the next corresponding action that will help you build your confidence in that area. Okay, so go back and just listen to episode 18 again to get the full strategy. And then I want you to DM me any or email me any aha moments that you have had listening to these 2 episodes, because I really, really want to help leaders become more confident and more clear on who they are and what they're bringing to the table and how to get their teams to the next level.
Okay, so let's do a check-in after our last check-in. How are you feeling? Are you feeling more confident? Do you feel like you have a game plan for how to build your confidence capacity? Do you have some idea of what could be some of the elements, some of the foundation for your confidence compass? I hope that you got some things brewing, that your juices are flowing, you're writing some things down in your notebook, because I really think that episode is going to help you get started in the right direction. Were you surprised by the connection between confidence or trust and money? There's a huge connection between trust and currency and our global economic system. So really think about that. And I am going to include in the show notes the links to the imposter syndrome episode. I know a lot of you really enjoyed that episode when it first aired, and so don't hesitate to go back to that, because that's really going to help you rewrite some specific limiting beliefs that you may have that are inhibiting your confidence and getting you to a place where you can kind of create a new narrative in your head. And once you have a new narrative, you'll be able to do the same thing for your organization, for your team. And then I'm also going to include in the show notes a link to The Speed of Trust by Stephen M. R. Covey. This is, in my opinion, required reading for every leader. And so if you really want to focus on increasing the trust with your team and within your organization at large, you need that book. Okay, well, thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next time on the Kelly Symone podcast, where we talk about the art, heart, and science of being a great leader. Take care.